Can you talk into the mic, Malik?
Is it over?
Yeah, I have video if you want to see this craziness. Yeah, that's one of the more epic moments in the Michigan State college football rivalry.
Right now,
I surprised Malik with that one. He thought we were doing a different intro video. I kind of teed that one up.
A better intro.
Kind of teed that one up for him especially. Welcome into the show. It's Views from the Sideline. It is Tuesday, July 30th, 2019. I am your host, Chris Pappas. Alongside me is a very disappointed Malik Hill and Joey Tysick.
He just killed my enthusiasm for this show. I'm hopefully
sorry.
I can rebound somehow.
Hey,
All I remember from that is sitting in my dorm room on the floor with my head down for like an hour.
I just thought it was
That's all I remember.
I thought it was kind of funny.
Of course you thought it was.
Because I'm a tweener when it comes to Michigan State. I went to Michigan State for a little while, but I grew up like as a Michigan fan, and then Michigan State basketball became really good, and then Michigan basketball started to come back. So then I started being back to a fan of Michigan basketball, and I always go back and forth. So like watching those games and watching social media explode, like, oh, Michigan has a high, and then everybody's like, oh, Michigan State's gonna lose, blah blah blah, and then as soon as that happened, I could hear my grandpa yelling through the Facebook screen, like without even going on Facebook. I could hear it.
I still feel bad for Blake O'Neal for that whole. He was having one of the best punting seasons in the Big Ten that year in the country. He was just lights out that season, and then that happened, and everybody just threw him down the toilet.
All it takes is one mistake, unfortunately.
Let's move on. We have a good show, don't we, host? I'm not even going to say his name.
Wait, you're not even going to say my name?
He's host.
Fair enough.
Then you're
Chris.
Okay. I was going to come up with a nickname.
I'm upset, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey,
I'm very upset.
Look what t-shirt Chris is wearing. He's been upset for the last 10 years.
If this was basketball season, I'd dive into that, but football season is getting close, and we're not going to dive into those waters yet.
All right. So, today's show, we're doing our top 10 college football players, our favorite college football players since the year 2000 and on. So we're not going to date ourselves too much. Couple things we want to hit before we get into that. Again, another slow week in sports. AJ Green, he fractured his ankle. He's out 6 to 8 weeks for the Bengals. And then CJ McCollum, actually right before we got into the studio today, signed a 3-year, $100 million extension to his already 2-year deal that he had, making it 5 years, $157 million. He will be playing for the Blazers for a very long, long time. Next to Damian Lillard. Anything you guys want to touch on there right before we get going?
I don't know why the Bengals haven't just started their rebuild yet. I mean, they know how much they can get out of Andy Dalton. He's good. He's nothing more.
He's had a couple above average seasons.
Exactly. When he's on, he plays really good when he's on, but you can only get so much out of Andy Dalton.
Yeah.
You've had AJ Green has been unhealthy the past 2 years. You've had the Marvin Lewis debacle. I mean,
they've gone through a slew of running backs over the last few years,
and everybody in their division has gotten so much better.
Right.
At this point, I don't see why they just embrace the rebuild. You've had your glimpses of hope, but it's not going to work this way. Obviously, you've seen it over the past 10 years. It's not going to work the way they're doing it. I think it's time to start over.
Yeah, unfortunately, AJ Green cannot stay healthy during a season. He's been one of my favorite wide receivers in the NFL for a while, but he just can't stay on the field. When he's on the field, he's one of the best wide receivers in the league. But that's been the biggest concern, is that he just can't stay on the field. So it's unfortunate. But yeah, I think the Bengals need to fall back a little bit.
All right, let's jump right into it. We're doing our top 10. We'll all give an honorable mention to start. I'll start us off. My honorable mention, top 10 college football players, my favorite college football players. Honorable mention, Andrew Luck. Stanford. Loved watching him play. That was my high school years. He was the prime quarterback when I was in high school, and it was just fun to watch him play, how he commanded the field. Under Jim Harbaugh, I believe, at that time too, and it was just a fun, exciting brand of football. So yeah, Andrew Luck is my honorable mention. Nothing, Joe? Joe just has...
Are we going to me? You're the host. You're directing.
Yes, host.
So we coming to me? Is that what we're doing?
Who's
Sure.
next?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right.
You put this on yourself.
My honorable mention is going to be a bit of a surprise. Probably not many people really know about him unless you're a big MSU fan. I was at MSU from
Keith Appling.
2011 to 2012. And my freshman year at Michigan State went undefeated at home. It was incredible. Keith Nickel is my honorable mention. Wide receiver.
The wide receiver, old quarterback.
Converted from quarterback. And the reason for this honorable mention is because I was at the game when Michigan State was playing Nebraska, Russell Wilson, and Kirk Cousins threw a Hail Mary at the end of the game. Ball got tipped. Keith Nickel grabbed it. And this game was televised on ESPN, and I was at the game. And Spartan Stadium was dead quiet because nobody knew. They initially called it like short in inches or something like that, and the clock had expired or whatever. And people started breaking out their phones, and ESPN is playing the replay meanwhile. So all these people are having their phones out, and they're like, well, ESPN's starting to say that it's good. ESPN's showing that the replay looks good. And so there was another pause where the refs started to come out on the field, and everybody was like dead quiet. Like you could hear crickets. And as soon as they put their two hands up, the place exploded. It was the most memorable moment, I think, of my sporting life, just because I was there for that. And to think about all the big names that were actually in that game was just super cool. So since he caught the game-winning touchdown, that's my honorable mention.
Malik?
My honorable mention is Drew Dilio, slot receiver for the University of Michigan. I think from it was 2010 to 2014, but he really got playing time from 2012 to, I think it was 2011 and 2013, I think. I love guys that I think you could say kind of beat the odds. He was every bit of 5'8". I don't think he was an inch over 5'8". He was probably listed at maybe 5'10", but he was 5'8", maybe 175, 180 pounds. Not that fast, but he was a really good route runner. He had really good hands, and he made all the best catches he made were when they counted. The game under the lights in 2013 versus Notre Dame, he made the catch to separate it and for them to officially win the game. When they beat Michigan State in 2012 at home, he made the big catch to get the first down and for Brendan Gibbons to hit the field goal for them to win. He always made big catches when it mattered, and he never had great stats. He was never going to have great stats. He was dependent on to get tough yards, make tough catches, and he always made them when he needed to, and I appreciated Drew Dilio for that.
Well, we're going to keep going on the Michigan bandwagon here. My number 10, Michigan football great Braylon Edwards, wide receiver for the Wolverines. His best season, 2004, 1,300 yards, 15 touchdowns, all receiving. Dude was a monster.
He was almost unstoppable. He was pretty much unstoppable.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really watch him live. I ended up watching YouTube videos and all those highlight videos of Braylon, just being a Walmart Wolverine like I am. But just so even at that time, I'm probably watching these videos in 2012, 2013, seeing what he's doing 9 years ago is crazy. He really had the command of the football field at the wide receiver position, which is difficult to do sometimes.
He had a solid NFL career, too. I mean, it wasn't great or maybe as expected, but he had some good seasons in there.
Drafted by the Browns.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Joey, who you got for 10?
My number 10 pick is Pat White. And that's probably no surprise after I talked about the Dolphins last week. But I didn't watch Pat White a ton in college. Like, I knew of him. And the first time that I knew of him was playing an NCAA football game. And in those games,
ridiculous,
because they can't have copyrights to names, you just get a number and the team. So you play with this guy and you're like, man, this quarterback is crazy fast. He can run all over the field. He can throw bombs. Who is this guy? So then you go on the internet, you start looking it up, and you're like, oh, it's Pat White. So then you start to watch him a little bit, and it was insane some of the things that he would do. And I've always been a fan, especially in college, big fan of the scrambling quarterback. You'll see it on my list. I got a couple of them. It's just kind of my favorite way to watch college football. I like that college football isn't like the pros. They'll take risks on play calling. They'll do different setups and things like that. So Pat White, my number 10.
My number 10 is another short Michigan receiver, Jeremy Gallon.
That's a good pick.
He was a guy that played a really big role at Michigan in his first few years, which is honestly surprising because that was still at the time when a lot of the Michigan receivers were above 6 foot, 6'1", 6'2", physical, and had some speed. Rich Rodriguez brings in Jeremy Gallon. Jeremy also wasn't the fastest, but really good hands, great route runner. And when he got into the open field, even though he wasn't fast, he was very elusive. It could break off 70, 80-yard runs when you gave him the ball just because he had great vision on the field and he knew how to get it done. My favorite version of Jeremy Gallon is in 2013 when Brady Hoke had them wear the honorary numbers and he wore 21 in honor of Desmond Howard. That year, a lot of people don't remember that year and completely forget about how prolific he was. That year, in a game against Indiana, he broke the record for I think catches and receiving yards in a game. He had like 14 catches and like 334 yards receiving. For some reason, he was an outside receiver at just 5'8", but he always found a way to get open and catch passes over bigger cornerbacks. And it always fascinated me how good of a player he was at his size as an outside receiver. Because you never see, when you see guys that small as outside receivers, they're either blazing fast like Deshaun Jackson. Those are usually the only types of guys that play outside at that size. So seeing him dominate the Big Ten that year like he did, absolutely just controlling DBs that were a lot of times more talented than him and more physically talented than him, he really has a special place in my heart as a receiver.
He was just a smart receiver.
He was really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, people forget how good of a year he had in 2013.
My number 9, Adrian Peterson at Oklahoma. Another monster. It really was. He was one of those players that you thought he was going to be really good in the NFL, and he actually did achieve that. Kind of like we thought Braylon Edwards. What? Oh, I thought you were giving a look. Okay.
Oh, no.
Okay, yeah. Well, just like Braylon Edwards, we thought he was going to be something better than what he was, and he didn't really achieve that. Adrian Peterson did. He put up some crazy numbers at Oklahoma. Again, this is another one of those players that I kind of just watch highlights of on YouTube, and it's just crazy to see him put it all together in college and carry that on to the NFL.
Yeah, I think Adrian Peterson, he's on the short list of guys that, even though it's not really possible and it's crazy to say, there are 4 or 5 guys in football history where you could say it could have been possible for him to be drafted out of high school.
Yeah.
Physically, there's a reason he finished second in the Heisman voting as a true freshman. He was one of the first people to ever do that. Rushed for like 1,700, 1,800 yards. Like physically, skill-wise.
1,900.
1,900. He was far above most running backs that were seniors in college football at that time. His gifts were out of this world. So, yeah, he was ridiculous.
And like you said, he almost immediately translated that into the NFL. He did the same thing in the NFL. So he's just dominated his entire career. And even now, like, he's had some issues and he's been on and off the field a lot in the past couple of years. But when he plays and, he gets good amount of touches, he has some solid games still. And he still shows that he's one of the best to ever play.
Joey, who's your number 9?
My number 9 is another scrambling quarterback. I'm going with Dennis Dixon.
That's a good pull.
Quarterback.
That's a good one.
From Oregon. So Oregon's one of my favorite teams. They have cool uniforms. If I was to be, I always go back and forth with my brother about this, but if I was to be drafted, or if I was to pick a college to go play football, I would play at Oregon. They got tons of money coming in with Nike and all that stuff, so it's always cool.
So you would have been paid a lot on the side.
No, you just get free jerseys and gear and shoes and stuff. You're not paid. Come on. But this, like, Dennis Dixon era is probably where I started to enjoy Oregon, and that's where, he was a scrambling quarterback, and then from there on out, they would just do crazy Wildcat type stuff. And as you saw with like Marcus Mariota and all those guys to come later, they kind of kept that within their. That's how they played college football, and that's why they're one of the most exciting teams for me. And Dennis Dixon, like I said, was one of those guys that it started it with him. He was a good quarterback, but he could scramble when he needed to. Not maybe as crazy as some of the guys that later came on, but he just kind of started that whole era, which I enjoyed.
Malik?
My number 9 is Lamar Jackson, quarterback for Louisville. I think he's the most electric quarterback I've watched live, I think, in my life watching college football. I watched almost every game he played during his Heisman season, and I really couldn't believe half of the stuff he was doing. Like the game against Syracuse early in the season when he has a read option play on the goal line, runs outside, hurdles over a linebacker, and just gets inside the pylon. He absolutely shreds up Florida State when they were a top 5 team. They blew them out like 49-15 and put everybody on notice. His arm was out of this world. He was the next equivalent to Michael Vick in college. 4.4 speed, could chuck the football 80 yards if he had to. Elusive. He had it all. And in that one season, he's easily the most electric. I'm considering changing that statement since I have another quarterback on my list in my top 3. He's one of the most electric quarterbacks I've ever watched, and watching him live was insane in that one year when he won the Heisman. And it's even crazier considering once he left, that team absolutely fell apart because Bobby Petrino was a despicable man of a coach, and they didn't have as much talent as they thought they had, and they completely fell off a cliff once he left. So he carried that team for 2 years and led them to bowls almost on his own shoulders. So it shows how much of a talent he truly was.
Yeah, and my number 8 kind of piggybacks those scrambling quarterbacks. Deshaun Watson, quarterback from Clemson. His sophomore year, he had 35 passing touchdowns and 12 rushing touchdowns. Like, the dude was absolutely elusive. He could kill you on both ends. You collapse on the pocket, he's throwing a dime or he's darting around the edge. Deshaun Watson was one of those guys that you turned on the game because you knew he was playing. You didn't, if you weren't a Clemson fan, but you knew Deshaun Watson was playing, you were watching. 6'3", had great size for the position. I mean, he still does. He's killing it in the NFL as well. But he was just so exciting to watch, to me personally, as a college football fan. Joey, who you got for 8?
My number 8 is another scrambling quarterback.
Wow.
Mine is
Shocker.
Tyrod Taylor. I've talked about him in the pros. I like him in the pros because he's super efficient. He's accurate. But he's coming after the era at Virginia Tech of Michael Vick. And I think it was first 3 years of being at Virginia Tech, he was kind of in a rotating system of quarterbacks, kind of like how you see some teams do it now, where you have one more of the running quarterback and one of your prototypical stay-in-the-pocket passers. But Tyrod Taylor in his senior year had almost 3,000 yards passing and almost 2,000 yards rushing or something like that. He had like 24 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions. I just like how efficient he is, because sometimes you see those scrambling quarterbacks and then they make a lot of bad decisions. He is so controlled in the game.
He was an underrated passer in college.
Right. And he's like, his body is moving uncontrollably. He's super fast and crazy and running all over the field, but his mind is always in control. And he knows exactly where he wants to go. And that's kind of like my favorite part about him. Again, maybe he would have been higher if I watched him more in college. It was, again, one of those things where I knew of him. I had played the NCAA games back then. It's kind of where I first saw him. And then when he got to the NFL is where I really took notice, I guess, more so. So that's why he's 8.
My number 8 is RG3, Baylor quarterback. He might be the only Baylor player to ever win a Heisman and be that caliber of player. again in that school's history, which shows how much of an impact he made on college football.
I feel like he's a little
at that
high
time.
for your or low, whatever. I feel like he would be closer to the top.
I had a lot of guys that were much higher, and honestly, I struggled putting him in this list because there were like 4 or 5 guys. I was rotating between 8 and my honorable mentions. So just because of how prolific he was, I'm just gonna go by his senior year stats. 4,293 yards passing, 72% completion rating, 37 passing touchdowns to only 6 interceptions, 699 rushing yards, 10 rushing touchdowns. And this was the culminating year where Baylor was finally on the college football map. He led them to a 10-win season. They upset Oklahoma. They upset somebody else. I can't remember who else, but they were lighting teams on fire. They were scoring over 40 points almost every game. Nobody could handle Robert Griffin III. His straight line track speed, because Robert Griffin III was never the most elusive guy, but once he broke through the line, and if everybody else was in coverage, he pump fake and took off. There was almost no chance of stopping him because his speed was just out of this world. And then he had a world-class throwing arm, which was also accurate, and an offense, the air raid offense that just fit perfectly under Art Briles. So everything came together for him to win that Heisman season, and he pulled out the Superman socks at the ceremony, which is iconic. RG3.
That track speed might be alluding to a later pick. We'll see.
Oh, shoot. All right, next up. My number 7, shocker, a scrambling quarterback. It's Cam Newton.
How many in a row are we about to do?
I don't know, but it's Cam Newton for me. High school, he was my... Andrew Luck was probably my number 2 favorite. Cam Newton was by far my number 1 favorite quarterback to watch in high school. Played at Florida.
You watched him at high school?
I watched him, okay, when I was in high school.
When you were in high school, okay.
Yes. I didn't watch him at Florida, the Auburn years. I mean, he was first in
the
Heisman
Auburn
vote.
year, the one iconic year.
The one iconic year. First in Heisman voting in 2010. The stats were crazy. 30 touchdowns, only 7 interceptions, and he had 20 rushing touchdowns.
Man.
For a quarterback. It was just something to see, and I don't know if we've seen another quarterback like Cam Newton in college football.
I think he's the most perfectly built college quarterback I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I mean, 6'5", 250, 4.5 speed, rocket arm, like, come on. Who was stopping him that year?
Nobody.
It was, yeah. He's almost like the Terminator with pads on. He was almost unstoppable when he ran with the ball. Yeah.
Yeah,
it was ridiculous.
And like all the scrambling quarterbacks that I picked so far are small for the most part. Pat White was pretty big, but he didn't have the size. And similar to RG3,
he was skinny. Yeah.
Similar to RG3 was also skinny, whereas Cam was just big and fast and strong. That's what was crazy.
Joey.
My number 7, we already talked about, Braylon Edwards. I started watching college football before I watched NFL. Mostly because my grandpa was a big Michigan fan, so Michigan game, any big game was always on. And I just remember some of the catches that Braylon Edwards would make in the end zone in big games were very similar to Calvin Johnson. He's not necessarily as big as Calvin Johnson, but he would just go up and make plays that you never expected. And I mean, I won't go on and on about it because we've already talked about him a bit, but I was a little disappointed in his NFL career. But overall, he still was great. And in college, he was incredible.
Malik?
My number 7 is Baker Mayfield.
Ooh.
Oklahoma quarterback.
He just missed a cut for me.
I honestly watched him by accident from his very first game at Texas Tech.
What do you mean
because
by accident?
2011, 2012, that was around the time when I really, really started to get into, okay, I'm watching from day one of the season, all throughout the season. I'm paying attention to all the conferences, all the players. I'm watching everything. I'm in tune with college football. This is my thing. And I think he was a freshman in 2013, I believe, at Texas Tech. He was a walk-on, didn't get a scholarship. Through the spring, got the starting job. And this is one of the first games I watched that season. I learned the story before the game. I learned about Baker Mayfield. I was like, okay, let me watch this kid. He comes out and lights up SMU in his very first game ever as a college football walk-on. I think over like 400 yards and like 4 passing touchdowns. He's just a sensation out the gate. Doesn't end up working out at Texas Tech. He leaves there, goes to Oklahoma where he doesn't have a scholarship there. He just pretty much tells the coaching staff, I'm coming. I'm going to come and try out for this team, and hopefully I'm the starter. He comes, has to sit out a year, goes to spring practice, wins the starting job again, takes it from there, and arguably becomes the best quarterback in Oklahoma history. Statistically, I mean, accuracy, arm, he's never had the size and the talent, quote unquote, which is why he didn't have a bunch of offers coming out of high school, but intangibles, leadership, the arm, he was amazing to watch. He was a guy that once he got out the pocket, he was very crafty and creative. He wasn't really a scrambler, but when he started running, he could make things happen. I loved the fact that every time he dropped back or came out of the shotgun, I felt like he was going to hit the open man every single time he dropped back. And that's what I loved the most about watching him. He was almost automatic, on point, no missed calls, no errant passes most of the time. It was on point just all the time. And I loved his attitude, and I loved how he went into Columbus and shut up Ohio State. Baker Mayfield, one of the greatest.
My number 6, another scrambling quarterback.
Wow. You have
Shocker.
more than me, actually.
I have
Don't say Geno
more.
Smith.
Don't spoil it. No, it's Tim Tebow.
Yeah.
Jets legend. New York Jets legend.
One of the greatest ever.
32,
I don't care what anybody says.
2007, he had 32 passing touchdowns and 23 rushing touchdowns. Dude was a monster. And in college, he kept his interceptions down. That kind of changed when he got to the pros.
Hey, man, when you got those types of weapons out there, it's hard to throw interceptions when you got those types of playmakers.
Tim Tebow was a sensation. He was a national phenomenon, even when he was just playing in college. He was just fun to watch. It stinks that he did not progress into an NFL quarterback like we thought he could. He had the magical year with the Broncos, but that was really it for him. Now, is he still
He's a
double
baseball
A?
player.
Is he still
Yes,
double A
yeah.
with the Mets
He's
farm
had-
system?
He's had some okay games.
Yeah. Hopefully he becomes a New York Met someday and he can make my favorite top 10 favorite MLB players of all time. But yeah, Tim Tebow, my number 6.
He's one of the most interesting college football players in history to me, because there really is either you love him or you hate him. While he is an amazing person. He really has never said anything out of bounds. He's never done anything to make people hate him. He just goes out there and does his best and plays the game because he loves to play it. Yet, the media put him in the spotlight. He just tries to go out and play football. He loves playing quarterback. He wanted to play quarterback in the NFL. People just jumped onto the hate bandwagon, I guess, because he's almost the perfect human being. Almost.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the reason why. But there needs to be a movie made about Tim Tebow. His story is really, really interesting and
And
fun.
then they tried to convert him into running back and stuff when he got into the pros.
The Jets wanted him to be a tight end.
Yeah, they tried to move him around, and he said, no, I want to play quarterback.
And I respect him for it. Everybody else that comes out of college and people want them to move from quarterback, they don't get any scrutiny. But
Right.
Tebow, yeah, it's weird.
He's my brother's favorite college football player. Probably one of my brother's favorite football players of all time.
People hate to love him.
Yeah.
And love to hate him.
I was kind of indifferent. I didn't really like Florida at the time. Again, don't like the teams that are winning all the time. And Florida had won 2 national championships in basketball, and they won in football. So I was kind of tired of Florida.
I'm a big Tebow guy.
But Tebow was a great dude, so I could never hate him. I just was indifferent. I was like, yeah, he's good.
Your number 6, Joe.
My number 6, another MSU that I got to see in person, and it's William Golston,
Oh.
defensive end for Michigan State.
Didn't expect that.
No, that's not what I
Exactly.
was expecting.
But again, you got to think when I was in school, Michigan State, they were known for their defense. Their defense could stop anybody, and it was incredible to watch. I've never enjoyed like a defensive team necessarily in football besides like the Ravens and Michigan State. And watching them in person was incredible. And the way that William Golston would just like get off the end, like he was a power guy. He would just run people over, but he had really good finesse moves as well to pair with that. So he was one of those ends that was like mixed talent. And like every time he hit, it was just, you could just hear it from the crowd. And he just made it exciting when the team would get sacks and stuff like that. And honestly, the whole defensive unit for that team, I wanted to include like Darqueze Dennard, but I couldn't do that either. But there's just a bunch of guys for that team, and I think William Golston kind of embodies that defense as a whole. So that's why I have him at number 6.
Malik?
My number 6 is I gotta confess, this is a kind of controversial one for me. It's Christian McCaffrey at 6, Stanford running back.
Why is that controversial?
Because partly a lot of my reason for having him this high is because of the transition he's made into the NFL.
That doesn't count.
That's why he was still on my list, but he went up higher because he broke the stigma of, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. He broke the stigma
of what?
Of the white running back.
Of being a white guy.
Yes.
I could have said it for you.
Yes.
Mike. If you felt more comfortable, I could have said it for you.
Throughout the history of football, it's been white running backs are power backs. They're not elusive guys that can just break the game wide open and change the game like all the other running backs.
And
that's always been the stigma.
And even if they are, they don't stick around. Look at Peyton Hillis.
Exactly. So
Sean Alexander.
What?
Chris is on one today. I don't
Anyway,
know where.
anyway. Malik, we're just gonna have a conversation.
This is a me and Joey thing. So I first saw him at the end of his freshman year at Stanford. I really had never heard of him, but I was watching Stanford near the end of the season because they were a good team. And at that time, Barry Sanders' son was the starting running back. And I noticed that he wasn't playing that much anymore. And I was like, what's happening? I noticed this kid, number 27, McCaffrey, is out there. They say he's Ed McCaffrey's son. I was like, oh, this is cool. Okay. Then he starts running the ball, and he's really impressive.
Yeah.
So I start paying more attention to him. Going to the next year, he changes his number to 5. All of a sudden, he just starts lighting college football up.
Yeah, kid was insane.
Extreme elusiveness, tough runner. And Stanford football is you pitch the ball to the running back.
And you just go.
And make holes for them, and they figure it out. Kick returns, punt returns, running the football at the middle, running it outside, even throwing passing touchdowns. Christian McCaffrey did everything, and he started to prove to me that he could be the guy that could break the stigma going into the NFL. Because he was one of the first guys I've seen like that, where he did everything. He had every single skill set you needed to be a good NFL running back. And I knew people around me that still doubted it because they had never seen a guy like Christian McCaffrey. And they've never seen a white running back like that in the NFL. Yeah. I try to convince everybody, I've watched this kid for like the past 2 years. He does this different than anybody you've seen.
Yeah.
And he's made the transition very well. He's a Pro Bowl running back. Loved him at Stanford. Kid was really good.
And I left him off my list for the reason of the transition, because I did the same thing. I was fighting with, do I like him more because of his transition into the NFL, or did I like him as a college player? I liked him as a college player, but not enough to make my top 10. And I mostly knew of him because one of my brother's friends is a big Christian McCaffrey guy. And I started watching him. He's like the perfect mix of running back of power and speed that you want.
On the college level, he's besides like Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey is almost perfect.
Right. And he can do almost a little bit of everything. And my biggest concern of him going into the NFL was he's not like undersized, but he's a little bit smaller.
That was
but then
thing.
When you saw him like after his first year, he put on a ton of muscle.
Exactly,
Dude is just brute strength, and he still got his speed. So after you see that and you start seeing him in an NFL game, you're like, oh, he's going to transition fine. And he's so fun to watch.
Yeah. A lot of people wanted him to switch to receiver because as well as being a great running back, he was just as good as coming out of the backfield.
Right, because at Stanford, that's
too.
how they used him a lot. They used him as a receiving running back and stuff like that.
It's not just the NFL thing. I loved watching him, and he impressed me that much when he played at Stanford. He's my number 6.
Now, for my number 5, I mean, you guys know me. I'm a big crab legs guy.
Are you?
Love crab legs.
What?
I don't think that's something we knew before now, but okay, well,
I definitely didn't know that. I've known Chris for 7 years.
yeah.
About.
I'm gonna keep asking you about your Jameis Winston thoughts when we go into the season. Spoiler alert.
Jameis Winston is my
I'm
number
a big
5.
crab legs.
Florida State Seminole. Played for Florida State for 2 years. Just another one of those passing and rushing quarterbacks. He was just fun to watch. For me, I knew Florida State was playing. I knew Jameis was playing. He's a 6'4" quarterback, big for his position. He was fun to watch.
He was a lot more of a pocket passer. A lot more. People forget that he mainly used to just sit in the pocket and pick people apart. The first game I ever watched him play was his redshirt freshman year when he won the Heisman. When they played Pittsburgh in their first game, he finished the game and was like 27 of 28 for 300 yards and like 5 touchdowns.
You probably had crab legs that day.
Come on, man.
What?
He's grown past. He actually hasn't grown past.
Yeah,
He's still immature.
I don't think he's grown past.
He's still very
to
immature.
be honest.
He still has a lot to prove as a grown man.
Yeah.
Needless to say, that was also one of my favorite stories to come out too that year.
Yeah.
That was just entertaining. Joey, you're number 5.
So my number 5.
That's all you had to say about Jameis?
Yeah, it was just so entertaining.
Crab
He just
legs.
wanted the crab
He
legs.
just wanted to get in and out with crab legs. Yeah, he was good at running and passing. Okay, move on.
So for my
Crab
number
legs.
my number 5 on the flip side from going to the MSU we'll go over to Michigan now. My number 5 is Brandon Graham.
Really good pick.
Now this guy, I just talked about how exciting William Golston was. Brandon Graham was even a level above that, mostly because I don't think the Michigan defense was good at the time, but it wasn't as good as this Michigan State team that their whole collectively made it good.
Yeah.
Brandon Graham
they
basically made this Michigan defense good.
Yeah.
And people were just scared of the guy. He was fast. He could just break through offensive lines. He could cover. Like he could do almost everything that you asked him to do. And obviously it does help too that he's had a good NFL career too. But watching this guy in college
he was a monster.
it was so fun because he like gave you something exciting on the defensive end for that Michigan team, whereas they were kind of more of an offensive team. So just watching him break off the end was so exciting. I do enjoy defensive ends. I think I kind of get that from my brother. My brother, a lot of his favorite NFL players were ends and stuff, so I've kind of learned to watch defensive ends, and Brandon Graham he was exciting to watch.
Yeah. I honestly feel sorry for him because he got caught in the middle of the transition from Lloyd Carr to
Right.
Rich Rodriguez. And a lot of people expected the defense to hold down that team while the offense was transitioning, but the defense was also going through changes. And while they had talent, they were like completely switching schemes and it didn't fit a lot of the
Right.
talent. So, yeah, Brandon Graham was the one guy that no matter what, he was killing quarterbacks and,
Right.
making things hard for everybody.
Malik.
My number 5 is Marshawn Lattimore, running back from South Carolina.
That's a good one.
Honestly, don't have a lot to say about him because his story is kind of sad. So many gruesome knee injuries
Yeah.
that ended his career. He got drafted by the 49ers because of his talent and never ended up playing a single snap. Couldn't play in the NFL because the injuries took too much of a toll on him, which really sucked. But in the short glimpse that we got to see him in his 2-3 years at South Carolina, he was freshman of the year in the SEC. I'm pretty sure he was first or second team all SEC. He rushed for over 1,000 yards. He stepped in. South Carolina was transitioning into becoming a good program at that time.
Right. He put them on the
Yeah, and
map.
getting him as a recruit, he just was going. He went into Florida up against Alabama. He wasn't afraid of anybody. He was, I think, like 6'1", like 220, fast and strong and elusive. He was giving SEC defenses everything as an 18-year-old running back, and I loved watching him play back then. And if it wasn't for those knee injuries, he'd probably be a Pro Bowl running back still at this time.
Yeah.
He was that good.
And I remember the one thing too about him, even though he's 6'1", which is still fairly tall. But he just had
he was either like 6 foot or 6. He wasn't extremely tall. I
Yeah.
think he was like 6 foot or 6'1".
But I just always remember like he just had like long, powerful legs, and he
Yeah.
would just always like like they tell you as a running back to always keep your feet moving. Like he constantly was doing that, and he was just plowing through people.
My number 4, we already talked about him already. RG3.
He was that guy.
Yeah, and he has an interesting story too because he didn't really play much his sophomore year, and
He had injuries too.
But he was also he was a starter his freshman year, had to deal with injuries, and then he came back and bounced back. His junior year was really good, and then he essentially just took another step.
Dominated.
And you didn't really think he could do that, but he did, jumping from 22 touchdowns to 37 passing touchdowns. RG3 was just so fun to watch, and all the points that you put out for RG3 put Baylor on the map for college football to that 10-win season. Yeah, RG3, my number 4 favorite college football player. Joey?
My number 4, possibly one of the best college football players, Darren McFadden. Dude was electric. He's another one of those guys that put his team on the map. Arkansas has always been like a decent college football program. They've had their ups and downs. But when Darren McFadden was on that team, it was a must-watch situation. The dude is another mix of strength and speed. And at the time, it was like something that nobody had really seen, it seemed like, for a long time. And he was just super electric. Unfortunately, his NFL career was nowhere near his college career. He had some decent numbers at times.
Yeah. He struggled with injuries for most of his career.
Yeah, but when he was in college, that guy, he's like one of the most exciting running backs I think I've ever watched, just because he's a mix of speed. I don't like as much of the power running back, obviously, because they're not as exciting sometimes. But Darren McFadden just being that mix between the two, being able to do multiple things for that team was incredible. And some of the tackles that he would get out of was incredible.
Malik?
My number 4 is a very, very personal favorite. I guarantee I'm 100%. Neither of you would have ever considered this guy or barely remembered him.
Did he play for Michigan?
No. BYU quarterback Taysom Hill. He now plays for the Saints. Number 7, the gadget quarterback. I couldn't listen.
I know him as an NFL quarterback because he had that one good play.
I can't give you. It's hard for me to explain my love for Taysom Hill because.
Is it like my Geno Smith love?
No, he was fantastic at BYU. I think it's part his story and his play along with his story. He tore his ACL twice in college, dealt with so much time trying to get back every time he got hurt. He came on the scene as a redshirt freshman, upset Texas at home. He was electric on the ground, and he was a good passer. Tore his ACL, came back, was still electric. Tore his ACL again. I believe he had to apply for a 6th year at BYU. And although he wasn't the same, he still was able to lead them to a bowl game and still was electric on the ground and still was a really good passer. I just loved the way he played and how tough he is and how he kept coming back from injuries and just appeared to keep the same skill he had. And his skill has shown in the NFL. The guy has I'm pretty sure in the combine or in his pro day, he had a 4.440. So people didn't know what to do with him from his injury history and the fact that he wasn't the most polished quarterback ever. The Saints get him in. He becomes a special teams quarterback gadget guy, and I love that Taysom is doing well now, but I loved watching him play at BYU. I really did.
And it just so happens that he landed with the Saints. And Sean Payton loves that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Just putting guys in almost odd positions and just doing this crazy play calling. Like, he's a perfect guy to fit into that system.
My number 3, Johnny Manziel.
I knew he was coming up somewhere.
Too low.
Johnny Manziel. Yeah, you know what? He might be too low. I debated heavily for the number 2 position with Johnny Manziel. Just the swagger he played with.
Legend.
It was something to see. this dude put on a show every single time, whether it was with his antics, his touchdown celebrations, or he just downright destroyed your favorite team when he saw him on the schedule. He was regardless of what you think of the guy because of what happened afterwards, he destroyed every opponent he saw on that schedule list. Johnny Manziel was a monster. Freshman year, 26 passing touchdowns, 21 rushing touchdowns. People forget about the 21 rushing touchdowns. He took a step back rushing wise in his sophomore season, but then he was 37 touchdowns for the passing. He could kill you both ways, essentially.
He's one of the most magical quarterbacks I've ever watched. A guy that could just make the impossible happen.
And the swagger he played with had such a draw to it. Joe, you want to comment on Johnny?
I have no comments.
Why aren't you a Johnny
I was
fan?
never a fan.
Don't doubt. Okay. No negative talk on Johnny.
Nope.
Let's move on.
How did his NFL career turn out?
We're not talking
We're
NFL.
talking college football
Exactly.
today.
I know.
Exactly.
I'm just saying.
What matters is what he
Curious,
did in
huh?
that A&M uniform.
Exactly.
I didn't really care
All right,
for
what's your
him.
number 3? Don't talk about Johnny.
My number 3, as I alluded to before, big Oregon guy, LaMichael James. He's another one of those running backs. He was undersized. He was pretty small, but he was fast. And the way that he would just break through lines and get into the secondary and just get past everybody was incredible. He worked perfectly into that offense where they would throw all sorts of different play calling at you, and he could do all sorts of stuff. He would be on the return team, and I wished this guy would have turned into an NFL running back. He didn't quite.
He was okay for a
Make it-
year or two in San Francisco, and then
He was
playing
okay, but he was just part of that Oregon team when they were super exciting to watch. He's one of the fastest running backs that I can remember in recent history for college football, and just some of the moves and cuts that he would make and how quick he was, along with his top end speed, was just fun to watch.
Malik?
My number 3 is wide receiver for Alabama, Amari Cooper.
What, Joey? What's that look for?
I've already stated my issue with Alabama before. So
Okay, I didn't know if it was with Amari.
It's not necessarily towards Amari Cooper per se, but go proceed. Don't let me.
Wait,
stop
so you can't have a favorite player because he played for Alabama?
that's just personally how I would end up doing it. Because if I don't like the team, why am I going to watch a certain player on the team that I already don't like?
Because they have so many really great players.
You're missing out on a lot of good players.
that are so good.
We're not talking about
that are
favorites.
amazing
That's
to
right.
watch.
We're not
Yeah,
talking.
they're great players. They're just not my favorite.
We're not talking about favorites.
Can we let Malik talk about Amari Cooper, please?
I'm more concerned about your hate for these teams. And
You
We
about
can
to
talk-
give him Alabama,
you wanna talk
Alabama
about it?
therapy?
Do you guys want to do like top 5 hated teams next week? I could do that in a
That'd be-
flash.
well,
Ooh.
next week is college
Anyway.
football preview, but
I mean, we could probably wait another week, but anyway, we'll talk about that later. Malik, Amari Cooper.
Amari Cooper. So, from his freshman season, he was looked at as the go-to guy from A.J. McCarron. He caught the game-winning pass in the SEC championship his freshman season. He only got better from there. During his junior season, he was absolutely dominant that entire season. He was almost unguardable. He's one of those guys that I felt like there was no way he could be a bust in the NFL. He was a sure thing. You talk about speed, hands, route running, go get it ability when you just throw him a fade route. I mean, I'm pretty sure there was a game they had against like Florida his junior season where they on like 3 straight possessions, when they got to the goal line, they just threw up fade routes to him, and he caught all of them for touchdowns in like 3 different ways. And it was just incredible to watch how much smarter and how much savvier he was than every DB he went against when he was at Alabama. And I loved how he played the position. I still love how he plays the position, even though he's in that Cowboys uniform. Love Amari Cooper at Alabama.
top 2, gentlemen. My number 2, Vince Young, quarterback from Texas. If you didn't know, you didn't have to watch college football back then to know who Vince Young was. He was a monster. I didn't watch him. Again, another one of those players that I watched all the highlights of him. I wasn't into college football when I was 10 years old, so I didn't watch him live, but he was just an outrageous player. 26 touchdowns in his junior year. I think it was his junior year. 12 rushing touchdowns. That was before the big craze of all the quarterbacks that can do both, those dual threat quarterbacks. But yeah, Vince Young, one of the greatest to ever do it.
Yeah, that's a good pick.
Joey, you're number 2.
Well, my number 2 has to be a hometown guy.
It doesn't have to be.
No, he has to be for me. My number 2 is easily Denard Robinson. There's no way that I could keep him even out of my top 5. He's a decent quarterback, but just the way that guy would run as a quarterback, and that's why I said when Malik was talking about track, guy was a Florida State track runner and back in high school, and you could see it. I didn't really care for the whole shoelace thing.
Oh, I loved it.
Well, sure, whatever. Have your own mantra. That's fine. But just anytime, similar to how Malik was talking earlier, like he was one of those quarterbacks that as soon as he pump faked, he's gone. And if there's a hole, he's going to get all the way to the end zone possibly. And
the amount of quarterback draw plays called
Right.
on that team too.
I wanted them to run with him almost every snap
Oh yeah.
rather than him throw it.
Honestly, they probably called a dangerous amount of quarterback draws for Denard. Like there was a lot of plays that honestly, you probably, if you want to protect the quarterback, maybe don't call a QB draw that possession. But
Yeah, and the other thing too is like I got to see him live. Like again, when I was at Michigan State, he came to play, and seeing him live is even
Oh
crazier.
yeah,
Like
his
to see
his
him
speed live is there's no way to put in words
right,
how fast he is once he takes off when you're in the crowd.
and that's
It's
why
ridiculous.
the game that Michigan State played was at East Lansing, and the best part was that Michigan State won the game, but Denard Robinson had a solid game. I got to see him run. Michigan State still won, so it was like a little best of both worlds for me. And still to this day, like I just enjoyed watching him play college football just because of you always knew that there was a chance that he could just break free at any moment. And he had some decent passes every once in a while. Never was crazy. But he was so electric on the field. He's another one of those guys I wish could have transitioned a little bit better in the NFL. Obviously, it was already going to be a tough spot for him, but he played decent with the Jaguars for a little bit in certain spots. But Denard Robinson is easily number 2.
Malik,
This one might be a shocker. It's coming out of left field.
Michigan State.
Not Michigan State. I don't know if you guys are prepared for this one.
Oh boy.
My number 2 is Denard Robinson from Michigan.
I was going to say, he's got to be on your list somewhere.
He's my number 2. I mean, from his very first carry was a play where it was a draw, a QB draw. He caught the ball, dropped it, going out to the outside, picked up the ball, hesitated, cut, and then was gone 40 yards for a touchdown. I mean, from his very first play, we saw how electric he could be and the type of jaw-dropping speed he had. And from the time he took over as a starter in his sophomore season, he built up the rushing yards. His reputation continued to grow as a Michigan quarterback. He beat Ohio State and Michigan State in his career. If he was only more of a consistent passer, his arm, he had such a great arm. And there were times where he can make some really fantastic throws, but he can never put it together consistently enough. But man, he's one of the greatest running quarterbacks to ever play college football. He's one of the greatest Michigan football players ever. And it was just, in the dark years I've had as a Michigan football
I was
fan,
going to say,
he brought joy.
The other thing that stunk was like
Yeah.
the team around him wasn't that great. Like they weren't a complete
They were good teams when he was there, but he never had teams that were any type
but
of
he made
contender.
them good. He made them
Yeah,
good.
he
It wasn't
he
like
took
there
them
was-
he took them to a whole nother level.
Right. Yeah, his decision making was a little questionable at times. But you can't deny the talent that was there.
All right. Our favorite college football players of all time.
I'm surprised you didn't have crab legs number 1 since you love them so much.
My number 1.
Is that like some new Greek thing?
What?
Crab legs?
No.
Somehow?
Jameis Winston, crab legs.
Okay.
You have to call him
I
crab
should have-
legs the entire NFL season. I'm expecting that.
Okay, deal.
So crab legs this week.
I mean, to
He
be
threw 4
honest,
interceptions.
we probably won't talk about him a whole lot, so it won't be that big of a deal.
Ooh.
But my favorite of all time, shocker, Denard Robinson.
Wow.
3 straight Denards. That's a
Three
good
straight
one.
Denard, so I'm not going to
That's a good
elaborate
one.
very much. We've kind of talked all we can to Denard Robinson, but he's my favorite college football player of all time. I mean, being a Walmart Wolverine, I was big into college football during that time. He was my favorite player, and he always has been my favorite player. He was electric to watch for all the reasons we've provided so far. He made a bad Michigan team. He made them good. The Michigan team,
the
around
first one with Rich Rodriguez, that wasn't a very good team.
No.
And yes, he's the reason why they made a bowl game. They were a much better team the next few years. But yeah, that first team, they weren't that good. But that was his best rushing season his first year starting too.
Joey, favorite college football player of all time.
Well, we're going back to the other side. And again, because I was there, I got to watch it live. Le'Veon Bell is easily number one for me. This guy kind of came out of nowhere for me.
For everybody, pretty much.
Because, yeah, that's true. So his junior season was insane. And there were so many times where Michigan State could just give him the ball, and you could think, oh, man, he's going to get taken down 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage. And all of a sudden, he pops out of nowhere. And you're like, how did he do that? And you go back and you watch, and the funny thing, too, is that, like, he reminded me of, like, when you play Madden or something, and you just spam the B button. There was a time where I was with my buddy, and we were watching the game. I can't remember who he was playing. Le'Veon Bell comes to the first tackler, spin moves around him. Next guy comes up, he spin moves around him. And the next guy, he spin moves around him for 3 times in a row. He does the same exact move, but his spins were so tight and quick. It was incredible. Like, it literally looked like a glitch in a game, the way that he would do it. And the most exciting part about Le'Veon Bell for me, too, is that not only would he use a spin move that not a lot of running backs you see use, like, frequently, he would use it all the time. He loved, like, hurdling guys.
He was one of the first running backs that used hurdling consistently in college football.
Like, he was super creative with his running. And again, he was a perfect mix of speed and strength, and just the things that he would do to make holes and make plays and get the extra yards was insane. And again, similar to Denard, being able to see Le'Veon Bell every home game for my first year at Michigan State, watching him every play was so exciting. And the things that he would do you'd just be baffled because you're like, how did he do that? And then all of a sudden, he's one of the best NFL running backs in the league, which is just super cool that I got to experience that.
And he's wearing that green and white again, Joey. I will get you a New York Jets Le'Veon Bell jersey.
Malik, what's your number one pick?
All of it translated perfectly to the league.
Right.
His running style.
He's gonna have that one of those years this year too. Yeah, totally.
Who's my number one?
Go ahead.
My number one is the guy that was too low on his list.
Oh, who was that?
The guy that put Texas A&M back on the
Oh,
map.
yeah, I knew it.
Number
Johnny
2.
That coming.
Football.
Never mind.
The
All right,
most
that's your show for the day.
The most magical quarterback I've ever seen, making something out of nothing almost every single week. I don't understand how he came into the SEC and just dominated it like he did as a freshman.
I don't know.
I'll never understand how he did it. How he went into Alabama and just carved them up like he did. It all didn't make sense while it was happening, but he did it almost every week, and it made no sense, which is why it was most incredible. And like he said, the swagger, the not giving a care about anything.
Giving a care.
A care.
Keeping it PG.
Yes, keeping it PG. You gotta love Johnny Football. Joey, you have to love
you have to love
Johnny Manziel because he is everything that a football
everything
lover,
good about college football.
You just said it perfect. He is everything that a college football fan loves about college football.
Exactly.
In one player. He is everything you love about football in one player.
No.
Yes. It's the truth. It's the truth.
I get, like, you guys, I get why you like him. Like, he's a good player. I was never, like, under the impression that his swagger was all that great. Like, it always seemed weird to me. It didn't seem, I don't know. It just, was off. And like I don't necessarily like players that have that kind of swagger, but I can appreciate
So
it.
you're
and I
a
respect
hater, is what you're saying.
it a little bit. But the way that he
least
went
he
about
admitted
it, the way that he went about it was just
Oh yeah,
odd
he
for
was
me.
cocky. He was so cocky.
So, like-
and I loved every minute of it.
It
If you can talk the talk. I mean, if
Right.
you can
You better
talk
be
the
able
talk,
to walk the walk.
Yeah, that
well,
that
and
phrase.
I'm not,
yes,
and I'm not saying that he didn't either, because like we all love Rasheed Wallace. That's what he did all the time. I didn't like Rasheed before he came to the Pistons. As soon as he came to the Pistons and he was under control while keeping that swagger, it was incredible to watch. For some reason, just the way Johnny Manziel did it, it just didn't seem.
Rubbed you the wrong way a little
didn't-
bit.
I don't know. Maybe it was just his style was off for
Or
me.
I think, Malik, I know what this is. I know what it is. He's a hater.
No, a realist.
Listen, he didn't play the conventional Michigan State quarterback style. Kirk Cousins, Brian Hoyer, drop back.
We can
efficient,
talk about that. I don't
Boom,
like.
boom, boom.
I've never been a fan of Michigan State quarterbacks. Never.
That's wrong of you.
I don't like.
That is
Connor,
very wrong.
I
of
didn't
you.
like Connor Cook.
Connor Cook balled out for Michigan State.
I know, but I didn't like him because they're boring pro style quarterbacks.
Pro-style quarterbacks are good too.
Yeah, they're good, but I just don't like them.
Johnny Manziel is the greatest college football player ever. Joey is wrong. He needs to reevaluate his opinions of college football.
I got to watch Le'Veon Bell live. Come on.
That's going to do it for the show this week, guys. Top 10 favorite college football players of all time. Views from the sideline. We will see you guys next week.
College football previews next week. Joey is wrong. Remember
Not
that.
Johnny Manziel.
See ya.